everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is my first video that I'm filming in 2020, so happy new year. So I actually haven't filmed any videos lately at all. I kind of took a short break from drawing and filming after Christmas, and I haven't really done very much, but a couple days ago I started a new sketch and I thought it would be fun to make a video about how you can start a colored pencil drawing. So starting a colored pencil drawing can be a little bit intimidating just because you kind of have to pick out a lot of colors and sometimes you just don't really know where to start. And it's just a little bit more of a tricky medium to get used to than maybe something like graphite. So hopefully this video will be of help to some of you, or at the very least hopefully it is entertaining. I'm just gonna get right into it and show you the sketch that I have been working on. So I have this sketch. It is roughly outlined. I didn't include a ton of detail yet, but I completed most of the basic parts of the sketch. Over here I have the reference photo I'm using for this drawing, so it's Kylo Ren or Ben Solo from Star Wars. I ended up picking this photo, but I also have this photo here that I liked because of the way that the light is on his face and the contrast in the background and everything, so I think I'm going to incorporate some of this. I just erased a bit of the nose with my kneaded eraser, and the reason I did that is because I kind of sketched that in messy. And when you're using colored pencils, you want to make sure that you have clear lines to color within in your sketch. So I'm going to go in and try to just sort of touch up these lines a little bit. I'm going to zoom out so that you can see that I also did the same thing to the hair. I also added some details to the clothing. Once you have your sketch completed and cleaned up and everything, the next thing you're going to want to do is start picking out colors. So you're going to want to have a color chart because it makes it a lot easier to pick out colors when they're already swatched for you. Now I'm going to study the reference photo, specifically the face, and see what tones I come up with. So I see a few lighter tones, like the highlighted areas. I have a few flesh tones from the polychroma set I could use for that. I also see in the shadows there's a bit of brown and even a little bit of gray. And then I can see that there are some cool pink tones and purple going on as well. There's really a lot of tones going on in a skin tone. To make things easier for yourself, you might just want to start jotting colors down even if you don't necessarily end up using all of them. This helps while you're studying your reference photo. Once you have some colors picked out, the next challenge is figuring out where to start in the drawing. So I kind of like to start in shadowed areas because when you pull out shadows, your sketch is going to start to look a little bit more 3D rather than 2D, and it'll give you guidelines for where the midtones and highlights are going to go later. But very important tip, you don't want to overdo your shadows. So you don't want to go in with your darkest black or sepia tones. At first, you want to start with maybe a somewhat dark but more like a mid-tone color so that if you do mess something up, it's not so hard to erase. For example, I'm going to start with two colors. This color called Cinnamon, which is a fleshy tone, but it's not too light. And then this color right here is called Walnut Brown. I'll start with the nose eye area. So what I'm gonna do first is I have my kneaded eraser, and very lightly I want to get rid of some of the lines here. One of the darkest areas in this is the nostril, so I am going to start by lightly, so you don't want to press hard even for a dark area at first. I'm going to start by lightly coloring in where the nostril is going to be, just to map that out. And you want to use a light hand, as I said, and a very sharp pencil so that you're not accidentally creating blurry lines. Basically, I'm going in and filling out every shadowed area, and for lightly shadowed areas, you go in with a much lighter hand and less color compared to a darkly shadowed area like the nostril here, where I might intensify the color a little bit by adding another layer. But you can see that the shapes of the nose are starting to become more clear. So if you use this method, adding shadows before you really start the rest of the drawing, with a sketch, it's going to really help you to see where the shapes are, and it'll be much easier when you're going in later trying to add more colors to it. There are some heavy shadows going on in the creases of the eye and near the eyebrow as well. At this point, the shapes are starting to come through a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is continue with my brown and find the areas that might be a little bit too harsh. Use the side of the pencil for this and gently kind of create like a little bit of a gradient where it fades out, because this is going to help transition into your lighter colors. So especially where there are like mid-tone shadows in the skin, you want to make sure that they all mix together and blend very nicely. So there's a shadow going on the side of his nose right here, and I just want to color it in very lightly because there's going to be more tones besides this brown color. Now I can go in with that cinnamon color. I'm going to mix it in with the brown a little bit, and then I'm going to help kind of blend this out into the white of the paper like I did with the brown color, but it's a lot easier when you're using a lighter color like this. Some areas are going to be very highlighted, so those areas I'm going to be careful not to color them in yet, because this might not be the exact color I'm going to be using for those areas. For now, I'm going to leave them white. Now those two tones are mixed together a little bit, and I'm going to go in with a darker shadow color. I'm going to be using sepia, which is best to use rather than black for a shadowed area at first, because black is very intense and you don't really want to use it at the beginning of an artwork. I'm only going to use this in the darkest of areas. So I pointed out earlier that the nostril was very, very dark, and I'm only using a medium pressure, not a hard pressure here. I'm going to go in and kind of outline where that nostril is, make it a little bit darker. It's definitely going to need black later on, but it's best not to start out with black. In my sketch, I outlined this shadow under the nostril that was very intense so that I would already have it mapped out. So if there are any very intense shadows, it might be wise to sketch them out beforehand so that you don't accidentally mess up like the size of it or anything like that when you go in with your colored pencils. I'm adding some sepia to the other nostril, and then it's also kind of here in the middle of the nose going up towards the other dark brown shadow, but it's not as dark as the nostril, so I want to be careful not to press too hard and accidentally blend it too much into the nostril area. There are also a lot of very dark tones in the creases next to the eye and eyebrows where the bridge of the nose starts. So this is another area I'm going to go in with a bit of sepia and work on, but you want to be extremely careful around the eyes because there's a lot of detail going on around the eyes. You don't want to mess up any of that and accidentally color in too much and not be able to see your sketch, because later you're going to have to add creases and things like that and eyebrows. So be very careful when you're working on the skin around the eyes and eyebrow area. I realized that I went in with a little too much sepia up here. Luckily I have my kneaded eraser that I can use to pick up some of that color. And since I was working lightly, it's not going to create much of an issue. Whereas if I was pressing too hard at first, it would be very hard to erase that, and that would pretty much not ruin the drawing, but it would kind of make it harder to fix that part of the drawing. So always work with a light hand, especially at the beginning when you're mapping out where everything is supposed to go, because it's easy to make a mistake or kind of lose like your thought of what you're working on at the moment when you're drawing for so long. Sometimes you just accidentally zone out or something, and you might color an area you didn't mean to color. So that's why using a light hand is really helpful. This is looking like a harsh shadow. I don't want it to be too harsh, but in the photo it is kind of harsh because I did pick a picture that had a lot of contrast going on. I do want to take this a little bit further and show how to bring more life into a skin tone. So I actually picked out a color when I was doing my color swatches. I picked out this color up here, which is called Indian Red in the Polychroma set. And it's kind of a deep color, but it's very natural toned. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the areas that I colored in with walnut brown, and for some of those areas I'm going to add some of this Indian red on top very lightly. And what this does is it kind of brings more vibrance to the skin tone. Depending on the tones and everything going on in your reference photo, you might not want to use this specific color. Be careful not to overdo this though. Not every shadowed area is going to have this red tone underneath it, so I'm just going to add a little bit in some of the shadowed areas, and it kind of just helps bring more life into the skin tone. Since I've gone in with multiple colors, I'm going to go in with my original cinnamon skin tone. Adding the skin tone on top after you've added some undertones helps to blend it in more naturally, and also you can create a little bit of a gradient so that it kind of doesn't look like it's just too harsh of a shadow, because one extreme struggle I've always had with colored pencils and portraits is I don't want anything to look too harsh and I want everything to blend together very naturally. Last thing I'm going to do here is take a bit of this ivory color. So let me sharpen it really quick, hold on. Ivory is a very light off-white color in the Polychromo set. What I'm going to do with this ivory is help transition some of these tones into the highlights. So my midtones and shadows are a little bit harsh compared to the completely white highlight I have going on at the moment. So I'm going to work on that a little bit. There are some parts of the highlight I might leave white for now because I do have a lot of time to build it up later. I've zoomed out a little bit so you can see this on a bigger scale, but this is where I'm going to leave off for now. Those were my tips for how to start a colored pencil drawing. That's about all I have for this video today, guys. I really hope it was helpful. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below letting me know what you thought. Happy New Year! I'm so excited to create more videos, and I have so many ideas for videos to create this year. So hopefully I will see you in the next video.